Palo Alto Networks is the cybersecurity vendor of choice for nearly 100,000 organizations worldwide, protecting hundreds of millions of people. This makes us a top target for cyber attacks. My name is Peter Havens, and I welcome you to join us in this Discovery series where we will explore how Palo Alto Networks Security Operations Center is protecting our company and our people, and learn how we do it. And we are back for another episode of This Is How We Do It. In this episode, we're going to dive deeper into the critical role automation plays in our security operations here at Palo Alto Networks. And with me today, I have Kyle Kennedy, who is our Senior Staff Security Engineer in our SOC. And Kyle leads our security automation program and the team, and he's really the architect of our approach to security automation. Kyle, thank you for joining the conversation today.
Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you. So tell me first just a little bit about your team. What's the automation team made up of and the dynamics of it?
Yeah, so we are part of a team that we call SOC engineering. So we exist alongside and within the SOC, but we are responsible for all of the infrastructure that underpins SOC operations. And so I am the leader of the automation program within our engineering team. And with me, I have 3 other engineers. We're all responsible and collaborate on building playbooks and scripts and all the automations that kind of help SOC analysts achieve speedy incident remediation.
Awesome. Well, good. So that's a pretty significant investment in automation for Palo Alto Networks. Can you just talk about why do we do automation? Why is it so critical? Why is it so important for our security?
Well, before we had automation, not even specific to Palo Alto Networks, but back when I was a SOC analyst, and we had no automation, we would write these alerts, and the alerts would more or less stick with the letter of the law, right? You'd spit out one row, you'd have maybe 10 data points, a source IP, dest IP, a protocol, and no context. And really the lack of context is what led to these very, very long rabbit chases, right? So you're looking for this needle in a haystack, you're getting the haystack, you're getting all these alerts, but you're spending your time on all of the hay and not on the needle.
Yeah.
And so really why we automate is to put out front and center in front of the SOC analyst, only what we want them to see, which is to say, if we can automatically remediate something behind the scenes, we do it. If we can suppress something that we deem not relevant to the SOC or to our security posture, we do it. But also to enrich that row of data, that 10 pieces of data points, into maybe more like 25, 30, 45 data points, the things that they would have naturally needed to do on their own, that would have taken them 20, 30, 45 minutes to manually do. We make sure it gets done consistently and before they even look at the ticket, so that they can make a judgment call right when they get there, and they don't have to expend too much effort to kind of formulate a conclusion.
So you mentioned a few things there that was interesting. We talk about they and them a lot, and it's like we forget that sometimes these are humans, right? These are humans that are coming in and they're inundated with just a massive, in the past, a number of alerts. So the first job of automation is to reduce what it is they get their eyes on, so that they're not seeing, they're not going through this.
Yeah, the fatigue of investigating incidents manually is, you ask any analyst, and that's probably their number one gripe, is just the mundane monotony of following these types of procedures and not seeing results for the majority of the things that you're investigating. So it can be really soul-crushing to be doing those things day in and day out. And so if we can try to reduce the amount of those things, overall we think that our SOC is happier for it.
You mentioned an interesting term. You said it's soul-crushing work, and I think that's really interesting because when we think about the difference between machines, which are doing the automation, they don't have a soul. And so since you've implemented so much automation within Palo Alto Networks, has it changed the morale of the team? Is there less feeling of soul-crushingness within the team?
Absolutely. So a lot of the things that we ask of our SOC analysts, like we've mentioned, it can just be very repetitive. And so being able to concentrate on the things that matter also means that our SOC analysts are generally spending their time on the things that are genuinely fruitful, that actually see results. So even if they're not a true positive security incident, we might find bad practices of this goes against our corporate policy, or this is maybe not a great configuration of this environment. So we see a lot of these results by the very nature of the fact that we're able to automatically remediate and remove some of the signal, or remove the noise from the signal.
Right.
And so our SOC generally finds that to be a worthwhile thing. So, I mean, comparing it to the old days of just brute forcing it, really,
Right.
You kind of, in a sense, almost lose perspective, and you forget how much is being handled behind the scenes. But it really does end up leading to quicker response times,
Right.
and less time spent on false positives.
Yeah, and now you have your valuable security analysts actually spending time on the things that we believe matter, right? That we need attention on.
Yeah, and that feedback loop just is completed with the engineering team. So if the SOC notices that they're spending time on things that really don't matter,
right,
that they believe could be automated, right? That's our job to then take that feedback and put it right back into our program, so that we then take care of even more things for them.
Awesome.
So it's a constantly evolving and changing, system.
Yeah. Okay, so we've covered the why we automate, right? We're trying to do less soul crushing of our security analysts. We're trying to reduce the monotony and really make the work more engaging, and having them applying their skills to what really matters. Can we talk about what automation is, right? We get customers in all the time into our RVC that have tried to implement a strategy around automation. But what a lot of people don't understand, what are we talking about when we're talking automation? We talk about playbooks and scripts. What is automation?
It's a very hard thing to answer. I mean, obviously, it's taking care of something automatically, but where it lives is no one place, and that's what makes it hard to answer. So a lot of people think about, the alert pipeline or the IR process as a very linear kind of stage of steps, right? Automation plays a role in that. Plays a role in that in multiple places, right? So we're taking care of things, before the alert gets created. We are deduping, reducing the amount of duplicates. We're taking care of enrichment of the things that then pass that layer. And then we're also automating processes in and around the SOC itself, so that certain procedures are being handled behind the scenes and don't need to be handled by our SOC analysts. So that can be governance related, audit related, notifications and alerts of, program or platform health. Automation to us generally is in service of expediting the time to resolve and increasing the clarity and confidence we have in the conclusions that we reach.
Okay. So, like you said, automation is really intrinsic to everything we do within Cortex and within the solutions in that product. We do automation as we're ingesting alerts to correlate those alerts. But for the sake of this purposes, we're going to talk mostly about automation in the sense of workflow in response to an incident or alert. So tell me a little bit more about how your team, what does your team do on a day-to-day basis? What does a day in the life of a security automation engineer look like at Palo Alto Networks?
Yeah, so I mean, we have our automation pipeline where we have our Jira ticket queue of things that we are actively developing, deploying, or augmenting, fixing. We have an automated bug reporting pipeline so that our automation program, when a playbook encounters a problem, it actually automatically attempts to resolve that problem within the playbook for that incident. And if it can't, generates a bug ticket to us. So we will go through those so we can have an automatic and fast approach to rescuing these stuck playbooks or something that may have broken.
You mentioned something earlier that you said your team actually sits in with the broader Security Operations Center team at the beginning of every day. Talk about that a little bit. Just how does that feed kind of what you're going to do next in the realm of automation?
Yeah, so I mean, we get to passively observe. I mean, of course, we're there if there is a specific automation request. But we also passively observe what is taking place within the SOC analysts world because we are the same team yet separate. So it's very easy to become detached and not actually understand the hardships or the types of work that is being done within the SOC. So we basically try to listen in for complaints or gaps within our automated playbook infrastructure. So if we have an incident where we reached out to the user and the email template was incorrect and we asked them to do the wrong thing, or it was confusing, it lacked information. Sometimes SOC might not think to notify us, they might just think, it's just it was just a fluke.
Yeah.
But we want to hear those things, so we kind of listen in. We're embedded with the SOC, and we try to find those things before they know to ask.
And that gives you an opportunity also to listen for where maybe things are being inefficient, where there's an opportunity to reduce repetitive work. So what does automation actually look like? Is it playbooks? Is it scripts?
It's a little bit of everything.
Okay.
Yeah, so predominantly what we do is playbook and then some scripts.
Okay.
And it hasn't always been that way. We had a lot of scripts, and by scripts, Python code, executing within our XSOAR environment in this case.
And XSOAR, for those that may not know, is our SOAR. It's our automation and orchestration platform. It's a part of the XSIAM SOC platform, but continue.
Yeah. And so over the last 3 months, we've been undertaking more or less a complete rewrite of our automation program as it pertains to the SOC. And we're going from a pretty highly dependent code script dependency basis to almost pure playbook.
Okay.
For a variety of reasons.
Yeah. So we hear this a lot, right? No code versus code automation, and I think there's kind of a misunderstanding that maybe traditional SOAR requires a lot of code. We talked about this. I think you said in the past, something like 20 to 30% of our security, I'll call them elements within the playbooks, contain some scripting. Where are we at today?
Probably about 2%.
Okay, and reducing. Further?
If possible. So scripts play a vital role. And any automation platform that you exist within should have the flexibility of custom scripting and playbooks. The problem is when you're given the freedom to choose between which, you can solve any problem any which number of ways, right? Infinite number of possibilities. We fell into what I believe is the trap of that freedom, which is accomplishing tasks in the way that is most comfortable at the time. So it's a new product, you're unfamiliar with playbooks. So the tendency is to gravitate towards scripts.
Code gives you the flexibility to do whatever you want.
And it's what you see is what you get. It's very, very clear.
You've got to maintain it.
Exactly. Yeah. So we then found that our inventory of custom scripts only grew. The number of bugs that we were finding through this automated bug reporting system we've got, most of them were being traced back to custom scripts and not to the platform itself.
Okay.
And so we spent most of our time opening up these playbooks that we saw were having problems, tracing it back to a custom script, and then identifying that the custom script ultimately didn't need to exist. Right. So we're now taking these learnings and simplifying. And playbooks are a much simpler beast to understand.
Gotcha.
So you can look at it and you can very clearly tell what it does.
Right.
And there isn't another layer of abstraction that you have to deal with by having to jump over and read 100 lines of Python code to then jump back to the playbook. So
we talked about this as well earlier. This idea behind monolithic playbooks. When people think about playbooks, they think about these large decision-making process trees that frankly almost look like code in and of themselves and can be overwhelming for a new security automation engineer to grok and understand what it does and then approach editing that. So can you talk a little bit about monolithic playbooks versus more, we'll call them micro playbooks or modular playbooks? I know you're really re-architecting the way we do that. Just maybe talk about that for him.
Yeah. So monolithic playbooks, I feel like, are kind of the byproduct of coming into a platform for the first time, not having a clear idea of what you want to automate or how far you're going to go for a given, let's say, incident type. So if we have a phishing incident category, you might have aspirations to do a couple of things, but you don't maybe have an idea of where you're going to be a year from now or 2 years from now. And generally, monolithic playbooks are not, you don't set out to be that way. It just becomes that way over time. You're just bolting things on. Right. So having a clear idea of the platform's capabilities and the architecture that you are trying to envision, because ultimately, automation, even if it's just playbooks, it is an architecture. We are now redesigning. We were kind of in a halfway point. They weren't entirely monolithic, but they were not modularized to the extent that we needed them to be. So an example of that would be if we sent an email for an XDR endpoint malware alert, and then we sent an email in a different playbook for a phishing response. those were using entirely discrete playbook tasks and flows
Mm-hmm.
to where if we decided, hey, we need to actually change the emails we send, the template, it's not working for us, we need to update it, marketing told us to, then we would have to go into each playbook individually. And in this case, there's dozens.
Yeah.
Update all of them discretely, as opposed to if you come into it from the onset,
Yeah.
I'm going to create a playbook for sending an email.
Right.
That's the only thing you have to update, and everything else inherits that change. So that's where we're going. Everything is modularized. It's all kind of microservices within the playbook. The playbooks are effectively a container for a bunch of modules, and there are a few different things that happen a little bit differently
Makes
for
sense.
each one.
So really what you've done, thinking back to my days in software engineering, you've refactored our automation approach. You're really looking at more of like an object-oriented style of automation architecture.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So when you can change things once, and it will affect all the playbooks that really get invoked within our business.
Absolutely. And it also helps us to track, because we have a system of tracking value. And so we want to know when these playbooks are run. Now that they're modularized, we have the flexibility of saying, all right, within this send email module, if the email sends correctly or successfully, record a little tidbit, a little tombstone, that we can then later come back and say, how many times did this playbook run successfully? How many times did it fail? And we can then kind of pick and choose our battles. If we want to make improvements to something, we can tell how big of an impact that might have for the SOC.
Okay, so we've talked about the why we do automation, and we've talked about what is automation, but let's talk a little bit more in depth about how we do automation. We have customers that come into our briefing center every day that are asking us, how do we approach automation? What playbooks do we use? And I know we have a few dozen playbooks in place. Just talk about how you've structured things, like when something is ingested from into XDR, right? For us, XDR is our threat detection and response. Cortex XDR is our threat detection and response platform. It's now part of the overall SOC platform, which is XSIAM. So you've got your alerts and incidents that are being constructed there, and then they flow into XSOAR, which is also part of the XSIAM platform. What happens then? I know there's lots of different playbooks, some for phishing, some for DLP, endpoint security.
Yeah.
And you mentioned this modularization, and they flow into kind of like a high level, I think you said it was an upon trigger?
Yeah, so we have upon trigger, which I'll get to in a second, inside of what we call entry points. So all of our incidents, we kind of break them up by categories.
Okay.
So if you have Windows event logs, you might have multiple different types of alerts with discrete playbooks for each of those variations.
Okay.
We put those in what we call an entry point. So an entry point is effectively a triage playbook. Now, the first thing that triage playbook does is run a foundational playbook we call upon trigger that does the lion's share of all of the value generation.
Okay. So upon trigger, so when you say value generation, take me through what it actually does.
Yeah.
For customers or of ours or those who are thinking about doing an automation strategy, help them understand how you approach that to set the foundation for it.
Yeah. So upon trigger is alert agnostic. So it's designed to run across all of our different categories. And the very first thing it does is it does an environmental detection. Make sure that for our developer environment, if it's running in dev, it will actually set a flag that then as the playbook executes the Windows event use case, it might skip over certain tasks because this flag is set to false. So we don't send an email to a user. We don't send a page to the SOC.
So this is like a playground for you guys to try new things?
Correct.
Okay, got it.
And so, that enables us to be able to run playbooks for real without having to neuter them while we're developing.
Gotcha.
So that's the very first step we take. Then we perform a deduplication. We make sure that there are no other incidents that have entered our system within a reasonable amount of time that are actively being investigated, so that we don't end up asking the SOC to look at the same thing twice. So that stage then attempts to combine the data of one alert into the other.
And some of that dedupe happens naturally within XDR as it's
Correct.
looking at data from lots of different telemetry
Correct.
sources.
And it's unavoidable in some circumstances to have
Right.
duplicates slip through. Right.
Okay.
So that's the nature of the beast. So at that point, we then do a data integrity check. We have certain fields that the enrichment pipeline that comes next needs. And alerts will generally have data populated, but oftentimes it's not in the format that you want. Sometimes you get a username, but it has the domain prefix. Sometimes you get it in the form of the email. of the user. And so this data integrity step basically checks to see, do we have the data that we need to perform our enrichment? Is it in the format that we need it to be in? If it is missing, we have some alternative fields that could be populated that may contain what we want, and we attempt to grab from there.
Okay.
And once we've verified our data, then we move over to enrichment. So that's user enrichment, employee enrichment, really. So we look at the user and what team they're in, where they're located, who their manager is, whether they're a VIP, and we set some logic accordingly. We have file enrichments. We'll take file hashes. We will look them up against external threat DBs. We will search them in our environment. We have the ability to kind of get some information potentially about some of these file hashes that were provided. And then we do IP enrichment and a few other things, but the same general things that you would ask a SOC analyst, right?
Okay.
Those 10, 15 parameters you get in your alert.
Right.
We want to be able to give you as much information as possible right up front. So that's what our enrichment pipeline does.
Okay, so data validation is really about, it's like a second pass of normalization. You've got normalization happening at
A sanity check.
at XDR, but this is really about making sure that the data is perfectly formatted or normalized for the follow-on playbooks that are going to execute, and that they will flow through and everything will be in place.
Correct, and that creates a nice basis. And by doing it consistently within a upon trigger, all of the enrichment is done the same way.
Gotcha.
All of the outputs are the same, no matter if it's a phishing ticket or a malware ticket. And when you're building all the downstream playbooks, you can depend upon these fields existing.
Gotcha.
So one of those key factors has always been, are they a VIP? Wait, who's their manager, right? We couldn't, because we didn't have that upstream, we had to do it. We were reinventing the wheel in every use case. If that use case needed to know the user's manager, it had to do it. So it couldn't depend on it happening. So bringing it all in.
Gotcha. And so in that enrichment phase, you're collecting all the additional information about the users, the endpoints, and all that. Is this also where you're doing like threat intelligence enrichment as well? Bringing in external sources or?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. For the indicators that obviously can be. Yeah, we're looking externally to everything that we possibly can.
Gotcha. Okay. So you're trying to decide which environment you're in, and then you're doing the data validation and the enrichment. I skipped a step. What was the second step?
Deduplication.
Dedupe, of course. Trying to reduce the impact to the security analyst.
Yeah.
Okay, that's essentially setting the foundation for automation moving forward. What's next? What happens after that?
We do assessment and escalation. So the idea of assessment is that we take in what we found in the enrichment pipeline.
Is this also part of the upon trigger?
Correct.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, so the idea is we want to kind of come up with whether or not this rises to the level of sending a page to a SOC analyst at 2 o'clock in the morning, right? So we have to be pretty prudent about how and when we do that, because those in and of themselves will create fatigue, complacency. So we want to make sure that we have a very high hit rate. And the outputs that we find in our enrichment pipeline, did virus total flag this hash as, a crypto miner, or is this user terminated, or any number of these types of flags can then feed into the assessment phase. And then of course escalation is just a more deterministic based on what was found.
Okay, so the assessment phase is really about understanding whether or not the automation can handle that incident fully or whether it needs to engage a security analyst. Can you just talk about, we're a pretty good sized company with 15,000 employees, but we're also the cybersecurity vendor of choice for nearly 100,000 businesses. So we have to be a pretty high target from a cybercrime perspective. So how much does this investment in automation really help or save our security operations center in terms of effort that they'd have to put in with humans otherwise?
Yeah, I'd say at least a dozen FTEs. It's hard to, pick one measure of value. I think that's actually something that a lot of businesses struggle with. Is it's an investment, right? You have these people, right? You have salaries that you need to pay to hire people to build automation. And how do you ensure that you're getting your ROI, right? You can see the objective value. You can see the things that are happening, but how do you actually quantify it? And so we're moving to a model where we can see the successful execution of different things, right? If we reset someone's session in Okta, right? Log them out, like that. Break glass. We're keeping track of those things so that we can then say on a more modular level, no matter if it was automatically reset or an analyst engaged that reset, we're still saving them time. because that's saving them the time of having to log into the platform and actually do it themselves.
Yeah.
There's friction there.
Yeah.
We're trying to reduce that friction and then quantify the value on a per kind of feature basis.
Right.
But yeah, many FTEs. And that's across things that are everyday occurrences, right? Things that they do day in and day out that we are handling on their behalf or expediting. And that's also things that you would never hire someone to do, right? It would just be so mind-numbingly painful to perform these tasks over and over and over again. You cannot reasonably ask someone to do that. So, yeah.
We talked about that. One thing that I thought was really eye-opening for me, it's not just about the things that we fully automate. It's when a security analyst does get engaged. When they're dropped into an incident or an alert, they're looking at a screen that has everything they need at their fingertips and very simple next steps that they can execute in terms of playbooks or automations that they can choose to do. They've essentially got buttons right there that they can choose what action they want to take, and that's just going to kick off a playbook.
Yeah.
Is that really how the security team interacts with incidents? They're looking primarily within XSOAR, which is now part of XSIAM, at a page that just gives them the information they need and gives them automation for the next steps?
Generally speaking, yes. I mean, I can't say for certain the percentage of how many can be resolved simply based on what we provide. But really reducing the amount of steps for an analyst to be able to confidently say, based on what I'm seeing, this is a true positive or a false positive.
Right.
Obviously, if it's a true positive, you're going to be digging in deeper and going further. But because the lion's share of what we do can be attributed back to poor practices, misconfigurations, things that are actionable but not true security incidents.
Right.
We greatly expedite what it is that they do.
And automation doesn't stop when it gets to the security analyst, right? They're analyzing and then they're making a decision, and they're essentially kicking off the next step in the workflow, which is, again, automation.
Yeah, we like to think of it as we're pausing for the analyst, right? In many respects, once the analyst has made a determination, we then pick right back up where we left off and we keep moving forward. So whether that's response actions that we've automated, sending out emails is a big one. We have a lot of employees, and so employee-based alerts, one of the big challenges is having consistent notifications or updates to that end user that look the same, come from the same mailbox, use the same template. And automating that is the most sensible way of doing it. So we house all of those templates, we handle that on their behalf, and depending on what the analyst chooses, directs the contents of the email. Right. So,
and that could be as simple as sending a message to a user, but you've also got buttons in there for as drastic a measure as re-imaging a machine if you need to, which is going to kick off a playbook that opens a ticket to make all of that flow naturally.
Exactly, because that's something the SOC analyst would have to go into ServiceNow, file a ticket, keep track of the ticket, right? So because you're automatically handling it, it's self-documenting. We record the ServiceNow ticket that's created back to the incident, and then there's a chain, right? A paper trail. So we very much like to automate things, even if it doesn't save a ton of time, because it improves the consistency and the attributability of the things that happen back to the incident. So when it comes time to have an audit, and an auditor says to you, show me your incidents, and they cherry pick 4, and they say, show me the evidence. You say you created a ServiceNow ticket. What ServiceNow ticket was it? All that information is just there. You don't have to think about it.
Yeah, very valuable. So we've talked about the why, less soul crushing. We've talked about what is automation. We've talked about code versus no code and playbooks and all that. We've talked about how. Can we talk about when? When do you automate, or more importantly, when do you not automate? Because you're creating something that you have to maintain as well. So talk just how do you determine what to automate, when to apply automation, and what the impact of that is?
There's definitely a discipline to it. You learn this oftentimes once it's too late. You've built a bunch of custom scripts, or maybe you haven't and you've just built a bunch of playbooks. And you want to begin to tackle more and more things, but you're realizing I cannot handle any more because my plate is full. I already have so many scripts, I already have so many playbooks. The bug tickets that come in, I need to go back and fix these things, or there's features that are waiting to be implemented. And so ultimately, the discipline of approaching the problem, what is it that is being asked of us? How difficult is it and how complex will it be once implemented? So that we can kind of swag a approximation of long-term upkeep, because and we don't generally turn down requests to automate, right? But what we do find is when we look at our value metrics and say somebody wants to add a feature to this module, this playbook, how many times has it run? Oh, we had it run 6 times in 6 months. We then have to take a step back and say, okay, well, we have the data to say, while this might be really useful, its aggregate time savings won't be worth the engineering time, or the prioritization of this, it gets bumped down below other things. So having your infrastructure be able to give you that feedback of when things run, how valuable they are, then also feeds into picking your battles of what you approach and what you're willing to add to your stable.
Right, makes sense.
Yeah.
Because everything you create is something that somewhere down the line you've got to manage and maintain. So it's really about weighing the benefit of that automation and how much it will get used.
Absolutely.
Versus the risk of not doing it.
And some of it is also, you might be opening a can of worms in some cases. So what I've seen, and it happens to us, I've seen it happen to customers, is you become the automation center, a lightning rod, right? And other teams are like, hey, that automation stuff, can you automate something for me? And oftentimes the answer is yes. And in some cases the answer is like, yeah, that's actually very easy. We could do it in an hour. But the long-term cost might not be, it might compromise your mission, your priorities. So it is about discipline and really weighing the pros and cons and thinking objectively long-term about whether this is something that has legs.
Awesome. So I imagine you and your team are rock stars, your VIPs and the security teams, because you help reduce the soul-crushing work that really brings down morale in the SOC. So it's been really interesting to kind of hear your approach to that. I'm sure our customers will benefit from understanding how you're approaching it as well. And I just want to thank you for taking the time to share that with me, to share that with our audience, and hopefully they find value in the way that you approach and architect automation within Palo Alto Networks. So Kyle, thank you for joining us today. And thank you for joining us as well. And we hope that you'll join us for the upcoming episodes where we'll explore how we manage our data pipelining, and how we go about hunting for threats within that data. Thank you.